Hello again. He is the Hall of Famer, Mike Scheck. I am Tripp Rogers. We are the Fantasy Sultans. Yes, we're back again with another show as we normally do. This will be our final, I guess you could say, Mike, this is either our next to last 2024 show or our last 2024 show. And the next one will be our 2025 kickoff. I don't know. I don't know how we can do this. I mean, there really hasn't been any fantasy for like a month. I
Yeah.
mean, truthfully, there hasn't been any fantasy to talk about for a month, but we normally do a show at this time, kind of look back a little bit, fantasy stuff, give you a Super Bowl preview, show you how badly wrong we can be. Although I'm still hanging my hat on the fact that I picked the Eagles at the beginning of the season. I'm still hanging my hat on that one.
And I was half right with the Kansas City pick. But I think that was an
There you
obvious.
go. There you go.
That was an obvious
There
pick.
you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're both batting 500 here. So
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we'll of course do our Super Bowl pick. And again, just to explain, we will be on the radio. The Sunday with the Fantasy Sultans will be on Super Bowl Sunday for a half hour, and then we'll do a season wrap up the following Sunday. And Mike, you have to tell them, where can they listen to us on Sundays?
Yeah, you can listen to us on Fox Sports Radio New Jersey, Fox Sports Radio Jersey Shore, and Fox Sports Radio New Jersey.com. You can hear us on 1450 AM and 93.5 FM. You can hear us on 100.7 FM at the Jersey Shore, as well as WJRZ HD3, as well as 95.9 HD3, The Rat. And yeah, you can check us out there. Sunday with the Fantasy Sultans. We are on Sunday at noon.
And also online at foxsportsnewjersey.com, right?
That's right.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. And then, as I said, this will be our final, our podcast, and then we'll take some time off. We'll do a podcast before, in mid-April, before we hit the NFL draft, and we'll catch up. And Mike, obviously we can look back. There is some news to talk about here, there, and everywhere. But obviously the big news in the NFL over the course of the last 3-4 weeks has been the coaching vacancies. The one that wasn't the New York Football Giants, the one that surprised the Dallas Cowboys, and the ones we kind of figured were going to be. And of course, those coaching vacancies led to some coaching surprises. Of all the moves that have been made so far, and I guess let's play the devil's advocate here. It looks like New Orleans is going to go with Kellen Moore, who is the Eagles offensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys for a while there too. They're going to go with him as the head coach. But of all the coaching moves, Mike, which one surprised you the most?
You know, I'm going to go with Pete Carroll in Las Vegas. Was a little bit surprised about that. Now, his name came up in the conversation for going to the Chicago Bears, and that wasn't really a surprise because, Carroll did want to get back into coaching. I'm surprised he goes to the Raiders, although I'm not surprised because Tom Brady had a hand in it, and he knows, the coaching experience with Pete Carroll before. He's got a legendary career. He's put together now a decent staff. Chip Kelly coming over from Ohio State. That is a huge move. The other one that I would say is a surprise is Ben Johnson landing in Chicago. I think, he was kind of projected maybe go to Jacksonville, and, we saw the GM getting fired because of that decision. Instead it goes to Liam Cohen, who comes over from Tampa Bay. But, I'll go Ben Johnson, too. And again, he was a hot commodity. He was a name that was going to be out there. We knew somebody was going to grab him. The Bears, they're looking for, a big decision there by Johnson to go to the Bears because I think he sees a future with Caleb Williams. Despite the season that he had, there's definite future and there's definite roster. There's good players on that Bears roster that he can work with, and then just get Caleb Williams going. I think they'll be going into the right direction.
Well, I agree with you. I think the Pete Carroll move in Las Vegas was a real big surprise. But the Ben Johnson move, I wasn't as shocked because the Bears kind of targeted him. And Ben Johnson, I think, had his pick of jobs this year. And I think Ben Johnson, the Bears came in, they grabbed him. Again, I think the pieces are in place. Johnson has been able to watch this Bears team for a couple of years. He knows what he's getting into. And, of course, the other part of it is that the Lions, because of their early playoff exit, and I say early because a lot of us felt that they would be in the championship game, going out on that loss, Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson gone by Wednesday of the next week, which I think surprised a lot of people. But Aaron Glenn, you knew, was going to get a job, changing the culture with the New York Jets, and we will talk about that. We talked about that on our Sunday with the Sultans show. And again, it was a nice move for the Jets. I go back to the move with Pete Carroll, and again, it does the fingerprints all over that are Tom Brady, but I think Carroll is aware of the fact he's 74. He is the oldest head coach in the NFL. And I think that's why Chip Kelly came on board. He's going to be the offensive coordinator. Chances are Kelly will get a third opportunity to coach an NFL team, and hopefully it will last longer than one season. Or two. No, the Eagles, he was the Eagles for two.
Yeah, he was with
for two.
Yeah.
But he was 1 year in San Francisco, and that was, he then went to college and, of course, resurrected his career this year, being the offensive coordinator for Ohio State. And you mentioned the Jacksonville job, and it was kind of interesting how that all played out because it was no surprise that they were going to they let their coach go. I mean, really no surprise there. But what was surprising was the fact the owner said, I don't want to blow everything up, keeps the GM, and then Liam Cohen is the guy that they're kind of pointing to. They said, okay, this is the guy we want, and he goes, no, thanks. Going to go back to Tampa Bay. And that's when, Shad Khan said, wait a minute, and maybe we do need to get rid of the GM. And they got rid of the GM, and then Liam Cohen came and is now the coach in Jacksonville. Again, the question is going to be, when you were looking at the jobs this year, Jacksonville was one of the jobs people thought, that's not a bad job because you've got pieces in place. I mean, you've got a great quarterback in Trevor Lawrence who regressed greatly this year. And again, how much of that was injuries? By the way, speaking of quarterbacks, and this is fantasy news because one of the surprises during the fantasy season, I think, was Kirk Cousins and the Falcons doing as well as they did, and then all of a sudden, the wheels came off. And Cousins finally admits he had a right arm and shoulder was bothering him. He had an ankle injury, and he said, well, not everybody is good, but that shoulder and arm injury, that's really where the season turned for Atlanta. And as a result, Kirk Cousins is a very expensive backup quarterback. As of right now, you don't know what's going to happen, but I think that was kind of interesting news to come out of the Super Bowl because, of course, everybody this week is in New Orleans, and whoever is anybody or wants to be anybody is there in New Orleans. And I think that was the biggest piece of news I got out of this week in New Orleans.
Well, I think what's interesting this week now that we're getting, heading into the Super Bowl is now we're hearing that the Rams going to trade Cooper Kupp, and that should be interesting to see where he lands. You'd have to believe that he's going to go to a team that's going to be a competitive, you talk about maybe Buffalo Bills, maybe the Baltimore Ravens, Dallas Cowboys could be in the mix, talk about competitive teams. And, certainly that would be, very interesting. It's surprising, though, that the Rams are going to trade him. I mean, you talk about him. The season that he had, fantasy-wise and everything like that, for the whole offense. I know you got Puka Nacua, but those two together, that's a dynamic offense. And considering the season that they had, and now they're going to move on from him. I know franchises move on from players. We see it a lot, but a little surprising, I would say.
I think it comes down to cap issue, and he signed a big extension. They're on the hook for a lot of money. And I think again, if you remember around the trade deadline, there was some talk that the Rams were looking to try and move Cooper Kupp. And he could have been one of the guys who gets moved. Now you move into the offseason and you start hearing the word cap casualty. And again, it's going to have an impact on fantasy because how many times have we seen players, and you can probably list about five of them off the top of your head, that end up leaving a team they were really good on, and not necessarily because they want to, but because the team is cash strapped. They let him go as a salary cap. He's picked up by another team and has a really good season, or they make a trade for it. And Cooper Kupp, and I was one of those guys who had Cooper Kupp, and he was great. And then all of a sudden, it's like he went off the cliff, and he's nothing. And that goose egg, um, week 15, I think, killed a lot of people, including yours truly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the question is going to be, and he's had injuries. He's had some injury issues. I think the Rams just are going to move forward without him. And again, it's a salary cap thing because there was some talk about possibility, what they're going to do with Matt Stafford because, they're on the hook for a lot of money for him. So, money makes, I realize this is a stupid statement to make, but money makes the world go around, and it's the truth. That's the truth. And the hardest thing to do is to keep a team together when you have these big contracts. This is not the NBA where you're going to have supermax contracts and keep people on your team for long periods of time. No, 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 no. This is the NFL. And again, I want to go back to when Tom Brady had those great years with the Patriots. He was always, renegotiating his contract, taking pay cuts, moving money around to make the cap work for New England. But finally, Tom got tired of doing that and saw that, all his buddies are leaving. So that's when he finally said, all right, I've had enough. It's time for me to move on from New England. So that's the game we're playing right now. And of course, we're really not going to know anymore until probably the middle of March, because that's when the new league year starts. And again, you're going to start seeing free agency. You'll be able to negotiate with free agents. And we're going to see some players who become cap casualties because teams need to save money. Now, how's that going to work with fantasy? Well, it's going to mean that some of the players who were really good this year are going to move teams simply because of the fact that you can't afford them. And again, you also have to pay some of these stars who have been outstanding. You look at the Dallas Cowboys, and they're in salary cap hell. I mean, I don't know if I want to be Kellen Moore coming. I don't know if I want to. I shouldn't say that. It's not Kellen Moore as the coach, but I don't know if I want to be the coach of the Dallas Cowboys because they've got some serious cap issues, and they got players who are getting injured. And I just don't know. Brian Schottenheimer, good luck, buddy. Good luck. This is the Fantasy Sultans. He is the Hall of Famer, Mike Scheck. I am Tripp Rogers. All right, lessons learned this year. And Mike, we always do this lessons learned piece. And this piece really talks about what we've learned over the season. And I think the biggest thing I've learned, we had said we were going to wait on quarterbacks. Then we said, we're going to jump at quarterbacks. I got to tell you, I don't know if I necessarily will wait for a quarterback, but getting a quarterback early can pay dividends.
Yeah.
Because we saw that with Josh Allen this year. He was a stud, a quarterback stud this year. And he, and then I think that's the biggest. I think the quarterback lesson is the biggest lesson. Don't wait too long on a quarterback. But again, sometimes it's just luck.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, the point that I was going to make is in one of our leagues that we were, that we did, we went with Jalen Hurts as coming out. We knew that was going to be a league where quarterbacks were taken early. So what do? We went Jalen Hurts. Then we came back with A.J. Brown. I think that was a great strategy. We didn't, our season, we finished in the middle of the pack. So it's not like we did that poorly. But I do believe that that was a good strategy, and I do believe that elite play quarterbacks, they do matter. Now, in another league, you and I went for Jordan Love and Brock Purdy, and it's a different end of the spectrum there. I mean, Jordan Love ended up getting injured. Um, Brock Purdy and the 49ers, well, they struggled. They experienced that Super Bowl
Yeah.
hangover. So,
Yeah.
that was kind of the situation there, and it's kind of like a gamble. You're rolling the dice on certain players at certain spots, and sometimes here's a case in point: Baker Mayfield, good quarterback. A lot of people were thinking or maybe overlooked him only because of his, sort of history. But Baker Mayfield came out and had some pretty decent numbers, myself included in the conversation of saying that maybe Baker Mayfield wasn't going to be that good of a quarterback. Well, he was. And, the credit, Liam Cohen, who's now in Jacksonville as the coordinator, and prior, yeah, you had Dave Canales, who's now in Carolina. He was
Yeah.
the offensive coordinator too for
Yeah.
Mayfield. So, I think that's another statement. Another interesting point I want to make is that drafting players, and this kind of ties in, you're rolling the dice. I mean, sometimes you're going to swing for the fences, and other times you're going to swing and miss. And I think really you hit the home run by picking Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery in Detroit. I mean, the two solid running backs. I mean, Derrick Henry was another stud who got it done, and I think that was an obvious pick there. But another, I don't know that we can always be right on which offenses are going to be good and bad. A case in point for that one is Miami. Nobody expected Miami, considering the previous season, to come out and fall as flat as they did. I mean, outside of Devon A. Chen, that offense was not good. I mean, and Tua's injury may have been a factor in that situation, but even when Tua came back, they sort of found a rhythm, but they didn't. And Jaden Waddle and Tyreek Hill, they kind of struggled. They came on a little bit, later on in the season. They came on a bit stronger, but otherwise, you just can't predict which offenses are going to be, you can gander and kind of look at trends, but at the same time, like again, like San Francisco, you thought they were going to be good. They weren't. Miami, in a case in point, thought they were going to be good. They weren't. So, and then, I kind of said, Aaron Rodgers was going to be a decent player. I didn't think he was going to be great, but
Yeah.
that Jets team just was not who they were either. And Brees Hall, we talked about him on, our fantasy golden mold. He was mold. I mean, that you're talking about a top 5 running back who really did not play well at all. And that was the Jets were just a complete mess last year.
But part of it is, again, you can only you can only guess as far as you can. And I want to go back because you brought up the point about Gibbs and Montgomery. Now, I don't necessarily advocate you take two guys from the same team. Now, the pro on this, if both of them have years like those two did, it was gold. I mean, it wasn't the case of where one would do well and the other would do badly. They both did well. And that Detroit offense was super. The downside is, well, the week of their bye, you were giving up a lot there. But again, I'll take that 1 week because the dividends that were paid off. And then when Montgomery got hurt, Gibbs picked up the slack and he was tremendous. So don't be afraid of taking two players, especially if you can get if you get one as a value pick. And if I'm not mistaken, I thought Montgomery was a value pick because I think I got him in the 5th or 6th round. And again, that's the other part of this little puzzle that you put together. And I'll go back to the quarterback. Having a quarterback wide receiver combination, not the worst thing in the world. Whereas if both of them stink, then it's a problem. Aaron Rodgers, Garrett Wilson, just going to bring that up real quick. We were talking about Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
But I think the other big lesson I've learned this year is don't be afraid to make a move. And some of the best moves, and we say this every year, but you've really got to think about making a move first couple of weeks. Go and get that person, that player that kind of shows a flash of brilliance. Who had Tyrone Tracy on their roster the start of the season? I'm telling you, no one did. Now, the thing about it was, I think I picked him up second week because it was obvious he was going to be the engine that drove that Giants offense. Granted, the Giant offense wasn't that good, but Tyrone Tracy, if you look at him, probably second half of the season, he was one of the top fantasy running backs in the NFL, and he paid off some great dividends if you had picked him up early enough and had him on your roster. Again, and I think there's people who don't want to make a lot of roster moves. You grab some guys, reaching for players in the draft, not the smartest time to do it. Again, wait until the first couple weeks shake out, because most of the time you can pick somebody up, get him to help your team, and you could finally, again, you stumble on gold. Because listen, winning fantasy is about luck. You got to have some luck. But listen, did we hit on all our moves? No.
No.
We did.
No.
And again, I think it was a very disappointing end of the season for me. I mean, I only got a second out of, I got a second out of, and I was in the playoffs with 3 teams. I only got a second, and that was disappointing. Two-thirds. I lost every game that the week 16, and that was just disappointing. That was very disappointing. Week 15, it was very disappointing. But anyhow,
we're going to be talking about the Super Bowl in our preview in just a few minutes. But I do want to, while we're kind of in the fantasy kind of mode here, I do want to talk about some big questions heading into next season. And for me, I think one of the biggest ones was one of the biggest disappointments, Christian McCaffrey.
Oh, yeah.
I want to see what his future looks like, because, again, disappointing. Didn't even score a touchdown. Played just 4 games. Injury, PCL, tendonitis in both of his Achilles. He's going to enter the season at 29. And what does that look like for most fantasy running backs? I mean, outside of Derrick Henry, who, north of 30, you don't see a lot of production out of aging running backs. So I'm going to be very interested to see his performance. I'm going to be very interested where his ADP falls too, because we talked about this. We're not so sure it's going to be in the first round. It might be the second. It might be the third. But I don't think it's going to be the first round, and he's definitely not going to be a top 5 pick.
But Mike, again, you talk about Christian McCaffrey, and I think it also, and we got to put this under the umbrella of lessons learned, because I think we said, and we were adamant about this, you got players that are injured, be very leery drafting them.
Yeah.
And also, and I think we said the same thing, the 49ers, look at all the turmoil they had in the offseason. First, you had the McCaffrey injury, and you had Deebo Samuel, who was sitting out waiting for a new contract. Then he got the contract. Then he went out. And the 49ers offense just never, I mean, they got lucky. They got another great running back in Isaac Orendo. Yeah. But then he got injured. And then McCaffrey came back, and he said, "I'll get rid of Isaac Orendo." Oh, no. I think the vibes around that were terrible. But you also talk about, Jonathan Brooks with Carolina, the Hall of Famers team.
Yeah.
He was another guy. A lot of people drafted. They said, "Oh, it's going to be great. Okay, he'll sit for a few weeks." Yeah. Did he do anything this year to justify where you drafted him? You've got to be very, very leery of drafting people who are injured, because as you can tell, and the McCaffrey thing, boy, talk about a perfect storm. Because if McCaffrey had played on Sunday, I don't think that first week would have sent off such a bombshell. But the fact that they played on Monday night and he came up on the injury report and was out 90 minutes before the game, and you that had to scramble to get somebody. I mean, listen, this is the NFL, folks. It's not there for your league. It's not there for fantasy football. Teams are going to do, and teams are going to keep quiet about things. That's one of the big fears. And I think the Christian McCaffrey thing, that was, I think that was, the McCaffrey is in a nutshell. You talk about McCaffrey as a player you want to look at next year. I am going to be very curious to see if we can get some, again, the Jet situation. There were two players who disappointed greatly. You had two first round draft choices. You had Brees Hall, you had Garrett Wilson. Both of them did nothing. Of course, the Jets season, they did nothing. But how are people going to look at their fantasy perspectives or prospectus for next year? Tyreek Hill, you know, do people trust him? Because Tyreek Hill this season was a killer because Tyreek Hill did not do much of anything. And he was a guy who was counted on. I hate to say this, Travis Kelce had some nice yardage, but didn't score touchdowns. And if you're in a touchdown league, I mean, that was kind of a killer too. And Travis Kelce is also getting up in age. What about this Kansas City offense? Because there's so many pieces to that offense, but is there someone you can really count on week in, week out? But you had those injuries this year, and again, that's a good part of this, I think.
And which running backs are going to move in free agency in 2024. Running backs excelled on new teams this upcoming season. You got Aaron Jones and Najee Harris. They could be looking for new teams. But beyond that, there's guys with injury concerns like J.K. Dobbins, Nick Chubb, and Javonte Williams. And unless one of those guys really step up into a situation where they're the clear running back number one, I think they're all going to underwhelm at this point because, I just think that, we're looking at a mediocre season for these players because it is just not there. I mean, and the talent is not there. Whereas last year, you had all these situations and these moving players and they were in right situations, but again, this is why we say they're the big question marks going into the fantasy season. We'll have to see. I would watch very carefully in the offseason, watch free agency, see where these guys move around, and see what the opportunity is for the future.
It's going to be very interesting in this offseason. And of course, everybody is going to want to try and catch lightning in a bottle like Saquon Barkley did with the Eagles this year. I mean, if you had Saquon Barkley, he was just, probably you had Saquon Barkley. You did very, very well this year. Because he was by far, and I think that is a great way to lead into our discussion on the Super Bowl. You have the Chiefs and the Eagles. You have the Kansas City, who was the number one seed, probably the least respected number one seed, the least respected home team in the playoffs, but they're going for a three-peat. Listen, it's not about style points. It's about wins and losses. They're a 1.5 choice against the Philadelphia Eagles. I will say one thing, Mike. I feel differently about this Eagle team than I did 2 years ago when they went to play Kansas City, and that started the Kansas City run. Kansas City won that game. I think this game is going to, I talked about 2 years ago, I didn't think that Philadelphia was ready for this moment. And I downplayed the fact that they really weren't tested in the playoffs. And when push came to shove, I didn't think they could do it. And I was kind of proven right. But I got to tell you, as much as I put down Nick Sirianni this year on our Sunday with the Sultans show, I was killing the guy. This is a team that responded to his coach. You cannot deny this guy is a winner. Granted, he's going up against Andy Reid, who is the ultimate winner right now in the NFL. And I think it boils down to, do I want to see history or do I want to see the Eagles win? And do I want to see Saquon win? And I am not one of those Giant fans who is bitter. Am I not happy Saquon's on the team? No, I'm not happy. But yet Saquon would have stunk just like the Giants this year. I honestly think, I think the Philadelphia Eagles are going to win this game on Sunday. As much as I would like to see history, there has never been a team win three straight Super Bowl Lombardi trophies. Of course, the Kansas City Chiefs are the first team to get the opportunity to play
Yeah.
for the three-peat because
Yeah.
all the other teams lost in the conference championship. I just think the Philadelphia Eagles offense is for real. I think it's going to come down to whose defense can contain the other. And I'm still not sold. I know Kansas City, they talk about the offense. Still not sold on Mahomes. I'm still not sold on them. I think it's the Eagles' year. I think the Eagles win the Super Bowl this week.
Well, we're not going to talk about the refs at all. I mean, we're just going to blow by the
We're not going to
refs.
talk about the refs. Come on, come on.
Ron
Come on.
Torbert's doing this game. Come on. But no, I'm gonna say I agree with you about the Eagles. I mean, that they're in a better situation than they were 2 years ago. I mean, you talk about that game, Jalen Hurts threw 4 touchdown passes, and they still came up short in that game. Why? Because it came down to here we go, the refs, the penalty call. Really, I mean, it was Bradbury with the penalty on Juju Smith-Schuster, and they that led to that ensuing drive, led to that field goal by Butker, and they win the game there. So the Eagles, they could have won that game, but that defensive penalty killed them. And you mentioned it. What are the Chiefs going to do? Well, what are they going to do on defense? They've got Steve Spagnuolo. He's one of the greatest assistants of all time. I mean, he knows what to do in those situations. He's going to dial up pressure, and he dials up pressure at the right moment. What's going to be interesting is how Jalen Hurts responds, because he's not very good when he's out of the pocket. And so that's what I'm going to be the most interested in, is see how the Chiefs defense responds. Can they stop Saquon Barkley? Not many teams have been able to stop Saquon Barkley this season. Saquon Barkley's run for 2-3 touchdowns in a game, and that's happened multiple times this year. So, it happened most recently in the LA game. I mean, Saquon Barkley can do it. So I'm not saying that the Eagles are not going to do it, but again, you've got history on the other side. The Chiefs, you got Mahomes, who just finds different ways of winning. This is going to be a good game, I believe. And I think that, Sirianni and the Eagles have had a good season, but I think they're running up against history. And I'm going to stick with the history and going to say that we are going to see a three-peat for the first time in NFL, history here. And it's going to be, I'm going to go for Kansas City. And an ode to Saquon. I'm going with his number 26. It's going to be 26-20 Kansas City.
Okay, I like that. Listen. Again, hopefully it would be a good game.
Yeah, I think that the
that
Eagles will. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll be a good game. I mean, we had. I'm trying to remember now, and I'm thinking back here. What was the last Super Bowl blowout we had? And they've all been I mean.
Well, Tampa Bay, and Kansas City.
I was going to say Tampa Bay, Kansas City is, but the
most recent one. Yeah,
the most recent blowout. That's what I was trying to think. Is the games have all been very exciting. Of course, down here in Georgia, they don't want to hear 28-3.
But that was a blowout in the beginning, and then it wasn't.
I know, but
the way
there you go. I mean, they don't want to hear it. They do not want to hear it. All right, he is the Hall of Famer Mike Scheck. I am Tripp Rogers. We wrap up the Fantasy Sultans for the year 2024. We will come back with you in April. We'll kind of recap the early part of free agency, look at the NFL draft. We'll see what's going on. We will, of course, talk about who's going to be drafted early. We'll have some idea by then. But don't forget, we're not leaving you. We still work. We're still working. Trust me, we're still doing this stuff. And we have our Sunday with the Fantasy Sultan show. Mike, tell us where you can listen to us online.
Yeah, you could hear our big game show this weekend. You could hear us on Fox Sports Radio New Jersey. It's 1450 AM, 93.5 FM. We're at the Jersey Shore on 100.1 HD3, 95.9 HD3. You could also hear us on foxsportsradionewjersey.com. And of course, we are on a half an hour this week for our big game show. And then the following week, it'll be a 1 hour kind of Super Bowl wrap up. We'll wrap up the postseason too, but we're on
But
Sundays at noon.
but Mike, we're on Fox Sports, so I think we can call it the Super Bowl. I don't think we have to call it the big game. I think we can. We can.
Well.
Yeah, I think we can because it's the Super Bowl. Anyhow, neither here nor there. Again, if you have a question or comment about the Fantasy Sultans, please feel free to email fantasysultans@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. Also, you want to listen to some good tunes from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, give a listen to WTRSradio.com, powered by Live365.com. And of course, let's not forget Tripp's Take, which is my podcast, which I do every week on Thursday. At the same time, we usually drop this one. Just my thoughts and trials, tribulations, thought process. And by the way, I think I told you this, Mike, September 5, movie you will love to see. You will enjoy that movie. Also, the Bob Dylan movie, A Complete Unknown.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. Anyhow, yeah, there's pop culture, little pop culture reference for you. We give you a little bit of everything. You know, we're always working. Like I said, it may be the off season, but Mike and I, we're looking at stuff. We're studying tape. We're looking at reports. We're looking at who's going where. We prepare everything. We are here. We are behind you. So next year, you will be able to hold the Lombardi Trophy or reasonable facsimile for fantasy football players. And you will win your league, and you will have the edge that you need because we are the Fantasy Sultans.
And you are not.